Hello, and welcome to Healthy California podcast. My name is Linda Brown, and I am the host of Healthy California, where my goal is to help educate you on your daily choices so we all can become healthy. I believe you, your family, your neighbor, and your community are all looking for better ways and simple ways to return to being healthy. Many of you have health issues or have family that's going through tough times that seemingly have no answers. It's frustrating. There are questions about health, environment, foods, exercise, and lifestyle, and it can be all overwhelming. And who do you believe? And where's the science behind it? This podcast will unravel the mystery behind being unhealthy and talk about little things that we can do in our lives to make a positive change in our health from all angles. So to be healthy, we need to have physical health, mental health, environmental health, financial and social health, and of course, spiritual health. Let's answer some of these questions to get healthy. What good is just listening to a podcast? I will give you resources as well, ways to take steps and make positive changes in your life to becoming healthy. This is a journey, not an assignment, so be kind to yourself. Hello, and welcome back. This is Linda Brown, your physical therapist, functional nutritionist, coach, educator, and host of Healthy California. I am so glad you're here today because we have an expert talking to us about why it is important to stack your body in a way that doesn't collapse like a Jenga set. Rob Kopitzke has been a physical therapist for almost 40 years. He's the owner of Body Concepts in Folsom, California, and is the person I go to if I need physical therapy. He specializes in many things, but is known for working with elite level athletes in cycling, running, dancing, and he uses Pilates as one of the ways to strengthen core for athletes. His team of therapists at Body Concepts specialize in pelvic health, Pilates, running, posture, gait, orthotics, and manual work. So grab your water, tea, or matcha, and let's talk about the importance of standing tall. All right, Rob, thank you for joining me on Healthy California. And so today we're talking about posture. And for those of you who are listening to this, Rob is the person I would go to. If I had anything to go to him for, I would go to Rob for. So a few years back, it's been easily a decade at this point, I had a pretty bad neck injury, and the only person that I would let touch my neck was Rob. So Rob is someone that I've known for a very long time. And as a physical therapist, he is my go-to for a physical therapist. So, okay, Rob, we're talking about posture today. Can you define for us what you would call posture, a good posture?
Good posture, I look at as the body being in a symmetrical alignment. So I'm looking for symmetry. Are the curves of the spine in balance? Are the shoulders positioned symmetrically forward, sideways, in elevation? Is the pelvis correctly aligned? Kind of our pelvis and our core is kind of the foundation of all of our posture. So that's a key area that I look at. And then from the legs, that can be influenced from above, but a lot of the leg alignment has to do with foot positioning and how are we aligning our foot ankle complex, because that's kind of how we interact a lot in our environment when we're on our feet. Is the foot is the thing connecting us as our base. So we're basically stacking. If you've ever played the game Jenga, we're stacking all of these blocks and we're trying to line up those blocks in as much symmetry and stability as we can to allow us to move efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, so just like Jenga, you can get a pretty tall Jenga stack. Doesn't necessarily mean it's stable. It just takes one wrong move and everything falls apart. So a lot of us are walking around that way. We seem to be stacked okay until that one thing happens. And then you've heard this many times. Well, it came out of nowhere. I don't know why this happened. And then you look at them and you're like, oh, it didn't just come out of nowhere. It's been a long time coming. Yeah. So when you look at someone's posture, you look at the pelvic alignment and the shoulders. What exactly are you looking for? How do you know that it's aligned?
Well, there's ideal, if you look at a netter's anatomy book and you've got this drawing and they've got this perfect plumb line that comes from the ear, lateral shoulder, comes down through the trochanter, which is the hip at the pelvis. It lines up slightly forward of the ankle. So that's from the side looking at posture. And then from the front, if we hang a plumb line, we're looking at coming straight down the nose, center of the sternum, belly button, and centering between the ankles. So we're kind of that's our foundation as we're taught. And every single person, you could almost use it as a fingerprint. We all have differences in our posture. And like you said, we have all these little blocks that we're moving around and we're functional. That doesn't mean we're ideal. And it can become dysfunctional where you take that one block out, the tipping point, and the whole stack collapses. I've been looking at posture in clients for 40 years. I don't know if I've ever seen a client with perfect posture, but that's kind of part of why they're coming is because there's some dysfunction, right?
Yeah.
If we think of like a dancer or an Olympic athlete, or the symmetry and the balanced body is, at least in their ideal form, is kind of what we're looking for. So it's optimum performance of the human body. And that doesn't happen unless we have good postural basis. If we put up a house and our framing is a little out of kilter, that's going to start affecting things. You're going to get cracks in your drywall and you're going to hear all this weird creaking. And one of these days the roof falls off or whatever. Somewhat like the human body, we're looking at, are we following the blueprint of what the ideal positioning is? How close can we get to that? Because no one's perfectly symmetrical.
And especially if they're in a sport where they are, it's like a one-sided sport, like tennis.
Yeah,
even though they may be strong, yeah,
exactly. Tennis, at least you're hitting from both sides, unlike golf, where you're always golfing in one direction. And it could be not even a sport. It could be all of us sitting at our desk, which we're doing right now. That's putting us into a certain position. Our hips are flexed. I might be leaning into the screen a little bit because my glasses aren't working right. My shoulders are reaching forward for the keyboard. I'm going into this, what we call upper cross pattern positioning, and I'm starting to slump down into my chair. So I'm losing my pelvis and low back alignment. So it doesn't even have to be a sport. It can just be a quote unquote normal thing that we do. And with sitting postures, we call it sitting disease. There's all kinds of elements that result from that chronic positioning. When we were back hunters and gatherers, we moved a lot. And now that we are more sedentary, it's becoming more and more problematic posturally. If you've seen the shirt, where we crawled out of the mud and then, we became a four-legged creature and then we became an ape and now we're humans, we're starting to devolve into chair posture. It's hard to find someone that's really upright anymore.
Yeah, we have. That was going to be my question is like, what is causing people to be out of posture, to have poor posture? And some of it is just how we spend our life at a desk or doing a sport one-sided or in driving. Like we're sitting at a desk. What is it that causes that to become chronic? Like tightness is on one side, weakness is on the other. Yeah.
Right. Any activity that we do, whether it's sedentary or some activity, our body responds to the stress we put on it. If we're in a sitting position or not, right, exactly. Yeah. But sitting has a stress to it.
Yeah.
If we look at interdiscal pressure, sitting is harder on our body than laying down or even standing positions. So sitting, just because of the nature of it, we tend to roll our pelvis into a flexed posture. Our hip is in a flexed posture. And it's not so much the problem is occurring as we sit. What's happening as we're sitting is the tissue is adapting to that length. And so when we get up out of the sitting position, that it really starts creating more problems in that our hip can't open properly anymore because it's shortened into that 90-degree flex position from our sitting. And so we go to stand, our hip doesn't open, and so we end up arching our back, low back. Our pelvis stays rotated forward. We arch our low back. Because our low back is arched now, our thoracic spine, our rib cage starts leaning forward to compensate. And if our thoracic spine is leaned forward, that projects our head forward. If we've got thoracic and head forward positioning, then our shoulder blades start to follow them forward as well. So if you've watched anyone in a retirement community, you can see what happens with chronic flex posture. They're walking along, and some of them get so bad that they can't even look up anymore because they're so rounded out, and that can be contributed with osteoporosis issues and those kinds of things too. But the basis of it is our flex posture as a society.
Yeah, and I did talk about bone health, I think 2 weeks ago. So go back and listen to that. But okay,
Right.
So when we think about posture, we think that that's not us right now. I mean, I'm not looking at the floor when I walk. That's not going to be in the nursing home looking down. What can we do right now? I know there's a couple things that you do as a physical therapist to get people to get into a good posture. And I know that since we're talking about this, everyone listening is automatically sitting up tall. That's kind of just
Right.
what we do. But what can someone do at home to see if they're headed in that direction?
A real simple test is stand up against a wall with your heels touching the baseboard, your rear end touching the wall, your shoulder blade should be on the wall, and the back of your head is on the wall. If that's
Seems
taking
easy enough, right?
right. If that's taking effort to be in that position, you're already in that flex pattern. And with time, it doesn't get better unless we're doing something specifically to change that. And one of the best things we can do is just move. Any kind of movement, get out of that static positioning is key. So we want to do something that moves our bodies in all kinds of different planes. So rather than being seated, go for a swim. Swim helps lengthen us out. Go for a walk. That's going to help open up that hip line. Take a yoga class, do some foam rolling, Pilates, anything that's posturally based and movement based, where we're taking our body and we're moving it through its full capacity is kind of what we're shooting for. If you have a job that you're sitting for 8 to 10 hours a day and you go out and ride a bicycle for 2 hours, now you've got 10 hours of being in a flex posture. So cycling isn't necessarily one of
After
the
you have
sports we
had your
recommend.
30-minute drive home and you're in that same seated position.
Right.
And then you go home and then you eat. So you're in that
We
same
sit for
flex
lunch.
position.
And how many of us sleep flat on our back? A lot of us are side sleepers. And so we're curled up in this little fetal position. That's where, when we do that we start seeing these postural changes even in our teens and stuff, right? You're always telling your teenager, hey, sit up straight. What are all kids doing now? Video games and cell phones. We're collapsed into that same pattern. So the biggest thing is move and try to lengthen your body within that movement, whatever that is. So it's not bad to go out and bike, cycle, but we need to, when we get off the bike, go for a walk and get on a foam roll and lengthen, go for a swim, do something that you're getting out of that pattern. So we can't sit for 8 hours and then go walk for an hour and expect that to balance out. It's better than not going for a walk and lengthening out. But ideally, what we want to do is get out of that chair every 20, 30 minutes. So if you've got a sit, stand desk, or you just do a lap around your cubicle, just get out of that sitting position. The more frequently we do it, the better. A lot of times I tell clients, it's kind of like your body is a cement mixer. If you watch a cement truck go down the road, the barrel is turning. And if it keeps turning, the cement stays liquid. As soon as it stops, it starts to harden. The same thing for our body is, as soon as we stop moving, if we're in a static position, the fascia of our body, the connective tissue of our body, starts to stiffen. And the longer it's in that position, the harder that connective tissue becomes. So it's harder to get it to move. So the more frequently we move, the more elastic that connective tissue stays, which then allows our musculature to hold us in good position with less effort. So if you're standing against the wall and you're straining to get there, to be upright on the wall, it tells us that that soft tissue, that connective tissue is already shortened. And we're struggling now to be in a normal alignment.
So if I am standing against the wall and, I have my heels against the wall, my tailbone against the wall, the middle of my shoulder blades against the wall, but my head doesn't touch the wall, but I'm not in any pain, then who cares? Why does posture really matter?
It's the long term that's going to be the bigger effect. And while you may not be in pain yet, you're going to have tightness, right? So we might not call it pain, but it's human head weighs 10 to 15 pounds. If it's not lined up properly, the muscles in the back of your neck are going to be under load. It's like holding a bowling ball in your hand slightly forward. How long can you hold that bowling ball there? So it's going to fatigue at some point, and as it fatigues, it starts to cramp and spasm. And that's the tightness and stiffness that we feel as the day progresses. And if we do that for long enough period of time, then all it does is it pulls us into your upper neck goes into what we call lordosis or extension. And at the same time, we're tightening in the back of the neck, our postural muscles in the front of the neck are weakening. So we're relying on keeping our head position with our extensors, and we're weakening in the flexors, which is part of why we can't get our head to come back into alignment again. So it's a double whammy in that we're getting tighter on one side and we're getting weaker on the other.
Yeah, you said that magic word earlier. You said yet. So
yes.
we're not in any pain yet, but that's what kind of keeps physical therapists in business, right? Because don't we spend a majority of our treatments working on people's posture and alignment and balance?
Everything is keyed around alignment, mobility, positioning. It's all comes back to, can we function in our ideal alignment? Yeah.
And that balance of the musculature.
Right. And the yet thing is like, okay, I can put a blindfold on the freeway and drive, and I haven't hit anything yet, but I'm going to. Right. So it doesn't happen as soon with the posture. I'm going to be, doing really well if I haven't run into something in 30 seconds driving down the freeway with a blindfold on. But our posture, it could take us 20 years. But you go to any school nowadays, we're talking, middle schoolers, their posture is horrible. It's not going to get better unless something changes in their activity levels.
In your practice, what type of pains do you see from people that just have a simple postural misalignment? What's the most, I guess, pains that you see that come into your clinic?
The most common thing, people come in with muscle fatigue, soreness, spasming, guarding, because
soreness and spasming where?
In the postural muscles that are keeping them upright, because only half of the muscles are working. So in that forward head example, ideally, the muscles in the back of the neck, the side of the neck, and the front of the neck balance each other and keep the head centered over the middle of your spine. As soon as our head starts traveling forward, the predominant musculature is going to be on the back of the neck, starts working harder. And the longer it works, just like holding a dumbbell in your arm, you're holding it with your elbow bent 90 degrees. At some point, your bicep is going to start to fatigue, even if it's a 1 pound weight. Now, I can hold a 1 pound weight a lot longer than I can hold a 50 pound weight, but it's going to fatigue at some point being in that position. So the further our head is out of alignment, the more those muscles work, and they're going to fatigue. And we're going to get soreness, just like we do in any other muscle that we fatigue doing something. So we have that initial muscle fatigue soreness. And then if we do it enough, chronically enough, repetitively enough, then we can start forming trigger points, which are highly densely spasmed parts of muscle that start tying into little nerve structures that reduces blood flow into the tissue. And we get these trigger points. And those trigger points can start radiating nerve pain throughout the body. So we call them trigger points because they trigger pain patterns. So oftentimes we find those in the neck, back of the shoulder blades are very common. The low back is another area that we get these little trigger points. So
yeah, the low back is very common for pain. What can someone do for their posture to help their low back?
So that all starts in the core. If our core is functioning, it goes a long ways to keeping the pelvis and rib cage connected in its proper alignment. If the pelvis starts rotating forward out of alignment, because our core, and by that I mean in a simple way, the abdominal wall musculature, there's other things involved besides that, but it's basically the abdominal wall if we want to simplify it. If the abdominal wall isn't supporting, your back is going to go into extension, your low back. Your pelvis is going to rock forward. And our vertebrae are built so we've got these big bony blocks that all of our body weight is supposed to be sitting on. When we go into that extension in the low back, the pelvis rocks forward. Instead of your weight being on that big bony block, what's called the vertebral body, the weight gets transferred backwards into the joint of the vertebrae, which is called the facet joint. And with chronic loading of the facet joint, it becomes arthritic. So if you think about arthritic fingers and how painful those are, the same thing happens to the joints of our spine as well if we're not lined up well. It leads to early degeneration. The cartilage in the joint structure breaks down. We get bone spurring. And the facet joint is right next to the nerve that exits out of the spine. So if we get inflammation of the facet joint, then we can get nerve pain, which then can create sciatic pain or referred pain down the front of the leg or something like that. It just depends on where it is. But it basically, poor lumbar posture, low back posture, is typically going to lead to degeneration of the joint structures more so than a disc injury.
A lot of times people think, well, I have back pain. The last thing I want to do is exercise because I don't want to create more pain. What would you tell that person?
What we have to find is the baseline of where we can start with mobility, exercise, postural awareness, because not doing anything is going to result in worsening, 100% guaranteed. So the physical therapist or, body worker or chiropractor, whoever you're working with, their job is to teach you where that foundation is for you to start at, that we can start rebuilding that tower of blocks. So we're reassembling the Jenga tower. Their training is all about teaching you how to put those blocks back in place. And they can assist, but they can't do it for you. So we're coaches, we're mentors, we're guides. We can give you the work to do, but ultimately it becomes the work of the client that results in the success. And if the degeneration has gone far enough, then you might be looking at a surgical intervention where they've got to fuse your spine or do a laminectomy or do some other type of procedure because the damage has gone so far. And then we're looking at all kinds of other complications that come with surgical intervention. But I always tell people it's kind of our last resort of having to go to surgery, because surgery is not like putting a Band-Aid on and it heals. It prevents, ideally, further damage, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be fixed. You're just trying to stabilize the severe dysfunction that has occurred. And you're trying to prevent it from getting worse. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get better, but it's not a magic cure that you have surgery and all of a sudden you're all better and you can go back to your poor posture ways, because
Right. Because you
guaranteed it
have
will come back.
Right, because you have an injury, a severe injury because of the surgery,
Yes.
the surgical site. And if you don't continue to try to improve yourself, then you haven't solved the problem. So that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is because there are simple things that you can do now, right now, to prevent that, to prevent surgery, to get to that point. So
Yes.
it's kind of my quest in life to just give people simple ideas, simple things that they can do right now to prevent that type
And
of stuff. And
it's those
it's
simple
not rocket
things.
science. Yeah, it's just it
Right.
can be simple things.
Right.
Yeah.
And the simple things are a lifestyle. It's not, oh, I got to do this for 6 weeks and I'm good. The simple things are something that we do our whole life if we're going to prevent this from being a problem. And if it has become a problem, we work on rebuilding the tower, and then we have to do maintenance on it. So just like the maintenance on a house, right? There's always something that's breaking. We have to do constant maintenance. So it isn't something like, hey, I'm going to work really hard on this for 3 months and then I'm good to go for the next 20 years. It's like these
Right.
foundational exercises, a foundation of keeping our core healthy and our mobility and our joints is something we need to think of as a lifestyle rather than as a quick fix.
Right. A daily, you don't have to do the same exact exercise for the rest of your life, but you just have to do something to keep yourself
And that's
strong.
right.
Yeah.
And that's where
So,
you're kind of looking at, okay, can I start doing a reasonable yoga class that's just part of my routine?
yeah.
Or can I do Tai Chi or Pilates or anything that's very movement based, where you have to think about how you're moving as part of the exercise? A dance class, anything. It can be taken to extremes. So I've had my fair share of yoga clients because
Mhm.
they went crazy on trying to do some wild and unique pose. And too much flexibility can be just as much of a problem as too little mobility. So
Right. Or
you want to
doing it
find that
too soon.
balance in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So when people have a pain someplace, their neck, their back, and they go to a massage therapist. And I love massage therapy. I think it's great. I go to a massage therapist. People have their team. And I think that, you can get a massage and it can feel good and it might decrease your pain, but you still have to strengthen and balance. Same thing with chiropractic. And even counselors, I just feel it's important that everyone has a team working for them of either a
sure.
counselor, their primary care physician, a chiropractor if that what works for you, acupuncture if that's what works, and then of course physical therapy because we're physical therapists. Yeah, people need to
Right.
create that team, but you can have the biggest team in the world, but we're all going to support you, but you still got to do the work.
You still got to do the work.
You can't massage your way out of a weak muscle. We were talking about simple things we can do. What are like three postural tips that someone can do today to help them in the future?
I'd say first and foremost, where we need to start is really learn how to activate your core, and that connects the rib cage and pelvis together. You really need to understand how to use the musculature that joins the lower body and upper body together. It's the foundation for everything else that you do. And that doesn't mean you do some kind of crazy burpees or something to do your core starting out. You really need to start at the basics of how does my transverse abdominis and pelvic floor muscles work in conjunction with my diaphragm to create a foundation of stability. It's not going to the gym and doing these crazy ab routines until you're ready for that. But you have to start at the foundation of it. And I think that's where Pilates as a type of exercise, if it's well taught, its foundation is in the core. I like their approach to starting with core work. But get somebody, whether it's a very well-educated personal trainer, a physical therapist, somebody that really understands how the core functions and have them teach you how to use it. So that's
and
the
a
first
Pilates
thing.
instructors would be a Pilates instructor would be a good person for that as well, because they do a lot of core work.
Yes. But just like anything, there are different levels of education in Pilates instructors. So you really want somebody that has experience, that has worked with people a lot. If you're going to a class format, it is really challenging for any instructor, regardless of their experience in a class format, to address form for the whole group and make sure everyone's following good form. So I always recommend, if you're going to do a Pilates class, start with privates until you feel and your instructor feels you have a good foundation of what your core is doing. And then you can go join a class. Yeah. So core is going to be the first tip.
Yep.
And
And what are
then
the other two?
the second tip is you need to get your shoulders and your hips moving. So you need to have good mobility of your shoulders and hips. A yin yoga class or something like that is a good starting point, especially if you have a lot of stiffness starting out. It's slow, it's low intensity, longer duration. It's really getting those deep connective tissues to move again. You'll get more out of it if that's where you're starting. If you've got decent mobility, doing something that's more of a dynamic warm-up that we do every single morning. If you end your day that way, even better. You get into a foam rolling routine or something like that to help open up and get the mobility. But those big joints, that's where our foundation of movement comes from, is we have core first, and then we have shoulders, and we have hips. If they're not able to move, you're not going to be able to have good posture, and you're not going to perform at your best in whatever activity you're doing. So core, and then hips and shoulders.
Okay.
And then third thing I would say as a tip is you just need to move. Get out of those static positions. You have to keep changing your positioning. There's nothing wrong with sitting. You just can't sit too long without moving, because I've seen some really bad standing posture as well. So if you're standing like a gunslinger from the Old West, that's not good standing posture, and it can be as bad for you as sitting in a chair all slumped over. The movement element would be the third tip, is just do something that gets you moving.
The saying in physical therapy, motion is lotion, movement is therapy. So for the people who are taking these notes down and they don't know what a transverse abdominis is, they don't know what a pelvic floor is, and they feel like they're moving, but they maybe aren't moving well. Where can someone find you, or what should they, if they're not anywhere in your area, what can they tell or ask the physical therapist?
So I'm located in Folsom. There are many physical therapy clinics out there, and our training, probably more than any other, is movement based. So it's a very good place to start getting at least an assessment by a physical therapist on your posture. Where is the biggest breakdown? And they can show you 2 or 3 exercises, like, okay, here's the biggest bang for your buck. You do these 3 exercises and it will address the biggest dysfunction in your posture now. Okay. And they can also kind of give you a reference point on, okay, based on what I'm seeing, this is how long it's likely to take you to get where you want to be, if they've got some experience with working with people. You can do Google searches, look at Google reviews, or
Well, you can chat GPT it now.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
Right. So, right. So every physical therapist should be able to do a good postural evaluation and give you some good exercises.
We're biomechanics experts. That's what we do.
Exactly. So, how does the body move, and how is it supposed to be aligned?
Yeah. I think that it's important that everyone, especially everyone over 40, 45, sees a therapist at least once a year. I mean, to get just to make sure that they're staying balanced. And, if you have a baseline of where you started, like I haven't seen a physical therapist for many, many years. Why do I need to go once a year? To go and see your physical therapist once a year, you don't need a referral for that. And if you have to pay out of pocket, one visit with a physical therapist can save you so much money in the future, because
Yes.
being out of balance and being unhealthy is more expensive than one assessment with a physical therapist once
Yeah.
a year.
And what I'd say is I'd move that age group way earlier, because by the time you're 45, 50, you're well into your patterns.
Yeah.
So if we can get people, I think it should be, you go to your doctor once a year for your annual physical, right?
Right.
And they're mostly checking on, blood work and blah, 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 right? They're checking what's going on under the hood. We're checking what's going on with your shock absorbers and wheels, and whether your windscreen is clear and those kinds of things. So we're I think that idea of going once a year to get the tires kicked and just see, how do we have any patterns? Do we have any trends starting? And it can be very simple. It isn't like you're going to have 40 exercises that you need to do every day. If you catch it early, it's so much easier to prevent than it is to catch up 20 years later.
Right.
So I would say, even, your general practitioner, when they're starting to see issues in their once a year visit, I would love to see the whole medical community work together more on that.
Right.
Here's another huge issue: post pregnancy. What does pregnancy do to a female body's posture?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's a big thing.
and there's no follow up on how to get your core and pelvic floor to work again afterwards. And most of the population thinks it's perfectly normal to have urinary incontinence or pelvic pain, those kinds of issues, which
After
don't have to
pregnancy.
be there if they're
Yeah.
addressed when the problem happens,
Right.
rather than later. So that's another whole basket
Yeah.
to look
Yeah. I
at,
think that's even, you're right. That's even more important if you've had a baby. That's even
Yeah,
more important. And,
yeah.
and
Your
we,
center of gravity is thrown off for months.
yeah.
You're going to be in this really lordotic posture. Your ligament structure is loose. Things move around, and your core muscles have expanded how far, and that they
Yeah.
don't just snap back.
Right.
So and
Like the birthing process is a traumatic event. And, we should,
it's super hard on the body.
yeah. Right. We go to the dentist once or twice a year. We go to a follow-up appointment for our doctor once or twice a year. We
Sure.
take our car in, on a regular basis, but then
Exactly.
we
Every
don't do
5,000
anything.
miles, right?
Yeah, but then we don't do anything for ourselves. So I think there needs to be
Right.
a shift in the way people think of taking care of themselves on the
Sure.
physical side of it, not just your mouth or
Yeah.
or your car or whatever. You just
Yeah.
need to be
Yeah.
more,
You buy
yeah,
it, you buy a new
proactive.
car, it comes with an owner's manual. You make a new baby, did it come with an owner's manual? Right?
Yeah.
Where in our education system are we spending the time to educate people on how their body is supposed to function? Right? We have one class in high school
Yeah.
on, basically sex ed, but I guess PE is supposed to be the area where you learn more about this, but basically in PE we mostly learn to play a sport, not how to move our bodies ideally,
Right.
or
Right.
what kind of conditioning would make your life better 40 years from then.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for spending
Sure.
time with me and explaining all this. I feel like I talk about physical therapy every now and then, but don't focus on it. And to get the take of another physical therapist besides myself, I focus mostly on functional nutrition these days. But posture is so important, and stretching, strengthening, balancing the body out is so important. And I hope that people learned something today. So I want to say thank you for spending time with us.
Yeah. If you go into a physical therapist for any kind of injury problem, if they don't start by looking at your posture, walk out the door.
You're right. Not every therapist is going to be a good therapist, but in general, all physical therapists are biomechanics experts, and that's what they should be doing.
They've been taught how to do it, and they should be doing it with every client that walks through the door.
However, people that have gone through pregnancy don't expect that every physical therapist is just going to be a good pelvic floor physical therapist. I mean, we each have our specialties
Correct.
as well. So people should be doing their research on where to go for specialties in physical therapy as well.
And pelvic floor physical therapists, a lot of people go, well, it's going to be a bunch of internal work. I'm not comfortable with that. The physical therapy, in my opinion, for pelvic floor issues, post-pregnancy issues, should start as any other orthopedic issue. You have to start by getting the core active, start to realign the posture again. And it doesn't need to be a lot of internal work. So if you're uncomfortable with that, there are physical therapists out there that do pelvic floor therapy without having to do a bunch of internal work.
Yeah. And I think that if you had gone through some pregnancy, that's definitely something to consider, especially if you're having low back pain or pain anywhere in the pelvic area, abdominal area, back area. That would be definitely something worth seeking out some help for that, because that isn't normal. And I think
Sure.
women are just conditioned to think, well, of course I'm going to have pain. It's just how it's going to be. And it doesn't have to be that way.
And men as well, post prostate surgeries or anything else. If we've had some kind of physical, mental abuse, it affects how our pelvic floor functions. So those are elements that go in too. And yes, by and large, it's going to affect the female side of the population more, but we see men in with pelvic floor dysfunction as well. It's not just women when it comes to pelvic floor issues.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be a trauma either. Like a physical trauma, it could have just been a fall off a tree when you were a kid or a motor vehicle accident. It could be anything, just even something you're not even really considering. But any sort of pain in the pelvic area definitely needs some eyes on it to figure out what's going on. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought, and this comes from Galatians 5:25, and it says, "If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit." And this is talking about alignment. It's talking about spiritual alignment. And today we are talking about alignment. We're talking about alignment of the body. So if we're walking in alignment spiritually, we have to also be living in a way that is aligned. And same thing with our body. We have to keep ourselves in good alignment to be healthy and to be strong so that we can live longer and live in a better quality of life. It affects our breathing. It affects our circulation. It affects our bowels. And it all just needs to be working properly. Our body depends on us to be in good alignment in order for things to be working properly. So this passage from Galatians 5:25 is talking about spiritual alignment. And today I was talking about physical alignment. And they're both very important. So I just want you to think about that for a second. And I also want to thank you for joining me today. This is a journey, not an assignment. So be kind to yourself. Stay strong, stay aligned, and stay healthy, California.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned something new. Health care and treatment should focus on being proactive and preventative, emphasizing the importance of addressing the root cause of a disease or illness. While the U.S. has an excellent trauma medicine system, helping patients when problems arise, our goals should be to prevent disease before they happen. That's why this podcast is so important to me. If you're needing further guidance or have questions on a particular matter, you can find my contact information in the show notes, where you can set up a 15-minute consultation. I also recommend you adding a functional nutritionist, a functional medicine practitioner, and a physical therapist to your healthcare team. This podcast reflects my personal opinions based on extensive research and education. It is not intended for medical diagnosis or treatment and should never replace the advice from your doctor or other healthcare professionals. To continue providing this free information, I rely on your support. Follow, subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your family and friends, or on social media. Don't forget to turn on your notifications to stay updated whenever I have a new episode released. Educating you and empowering you to take back your health is my ultimate goal. By gathering knowledge and implementing small but impactful changes, you can reclaim your well-being. This is a journey, not a quick fix, so be kind to yourself, and I'll be there to help. You got this.